Emily sat on the worn wooden steps of her small-town home, the evening breeze tousling her hair. Her eyes were fixed on the glowing television in the living room, where a military parade streamed live. Soldiers in crisp uniforms marched in perfect synchronization, flags waving proudly in the wind. Emily's heart raced, not from excitement alone, but from an unfamiliar stir of something deeper, longing, fear, and a hint of unshakable curiosity. For years, she had lived in the comfort of predictability, the quiet streets of her town, the laughter of her friends, the stability of her life. They were all safe. And yet, as she watched the soldiers march, she felt a tug she couldn't explain. There was something magnetic about the courage they displayed, something that made her question her own life. Was she truly living or merely existing? Emily's thoughts were interrupted by her younger brother, Jake, bounding up the steps. "Em, you're staring at that screen like it's going to speak to you," he teased, nudging her shoulder. She managed a small smile, though her mind was elsewhere. "It's inspiring," she admitted quietly, almost to herself. I wonder what it's like to really be brave." Jake rolled his eyes, but there was concern in his expression. "You? Brave? You get scared if a spider crawls on the wall." Emily laughed softly, but the joke didn't hide her unease. Courage wasn't about fearlessness, she realized. It was about facing fear, and for the first time, she wondered if she was capable of doing that. That night, as the town slept, Emily couldn't shake the images from her mind. Faces of soldiers, some young, some older, all carrying burdens she couldn't fully understand. She thought about the risks, the sacrifices, and the life she would have to leave behind. Yet something inside her whispered that she was meant for more than the ordinary. The next morning, Emily wandered through the town square, her thoughts heavy but purposeful. She saw Mr. Harris, a retired veteran, sitting on a bench feeding pigeons. His hands, rough and scarred, moved with a quiet precision that came from years of discipline and duty. Emily approached him hesitantly. "Excuse me, sir, can I ask you something?" Mr. Harris looked up, eyes sharp despite the years etched on his face. "Of course, young lady. I've been thinking about joining the military," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm scared. I don't know if I can do it. How did you face fear?" Mr. Harris smiled faintly, the kind of smile that only comes from lived experience. "Fear is natural, Emily. It's the companion of every soldier. The trick isn't to get rid of it, it's to act despite it. Courage doesn't mean you're not scared, it means you decide that something else is more important than fear." Emily nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. She left the square feeling a mixture of dread and determination. The path ahead was uncertain, but the seed of courage had been planted. Back at home, she faced her family during dinner. Her father, a man of practical sensibilities, frowned. "Emily, are you serious? The military isn't a game. People get hurt. People die. Why would you risk everything for this?" Her mother's eyes were softer, but no less concerned. "We just want you safe," she said, reaching across the table to touch Emily's hand. Emily took a deep breath. "I know it's dangerous. I know it won't be easy, but I feel like I need to do this, for myself. I need to see what I'm capable of. I can't ignore this feeling anymore." Her father shook his head, a mixture of worry and resignation on his face. "Then I can't stop you, but promise me you'll be careful." The decision was made. Emily enrolled in the enlistment program, the first official step into a world that was entirely unfamiliar. Standing outside the recruitment center, she felt a storm of emotions, excitement, fear, and the tiniest flicker of hope. Her hands shook slightly as she filled out the forms, each signature a quiet act of defiance against the doubt that had held her back for so long. Her first night in the dormitory was a revelation. The smell of polished boots, the clatter of lockers, the distant shouts of trainers, it all hit her at once. Emily felt small, insignificant even, in the midst of so many others who seemed to move with confidence and purpose. The fear she had carried her entire life suddenly felt tangible, pressing down on her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. Yet that same fear lit a fire within her. She couldn't run from it. She had to face it head on. That night, as she lay on the narrow cot, listening to the sounds of the barracks, Emily made a promise to herself. I will not let fear define me. I will find the courage inside me, even if it takes everything I have. The days that followed tested her resolve. Early morning drills, exhausting physical training, and the constant push to outperform herself, it was grueling. Every failure, every stumble, and every moment of doubt challenged her commitment. But for the first time in her life, Emily felt alive in a way she never had before. Each small victory, each push beyond her limits, reminded her that courage wasn't given, it was earned. By the end of her first week, Emily had begun to change. The reflection in the mirror showed someone who was no longer just a girl from a small town. Her eyes were sharper, her posture straighter, and beneath the exhaustion, there was a glimmer of determination that refused to be extinguished. She wasn't fearless yet, not by a long shot, but she had taken the first step on a journey that would transform her entirely. And so, as the sun set over the training grounds, Emily stood alone on the field, her heart pounding, her muscles aching, and a fire burning brighter than ever before. The road ahead was long, uncertain, and dangerous, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid of the journey. She felt ready. Because courage, she realized, didn't start with being fearless. It started with a single choice: to move forward despite fear. The first light of dawn cast a gray hue over the shattered village. Emily Carter emerged cautiously from the barn, her senses stretched taut like a bowstring. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, even the subtle snap of a twig beneath her boots could signal danger. The ambush had left her wary, every nerve alert, and yet she had to move. Staying in one place too long was as dangerous as moving blindly into enemy hands. Her supplies were scarce: a half-empty bottle of water, a few energy bars, a single magazine of ammunition, and her wits. Emily pressed on through the rugged terrain, slipping between the shadows of ruined buildings and jagged rocks. She relied on every lesson learned from her grueling army training: how to stay quiet, how to track enemy movements, how to survive when hope seems distant. She crouched behind a collapsed wall, observing a patrol of enemy soldiers as they passed the main road. Their uniforms were unfamiliar, but their methodical precision spoke of trained combatants. Emily's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had to outthink them, not outgun them. A direct confrontation would be suicide. Hours of careful movement led her to a small stream. She knelt to drink, her hands shaking from exhaustion and fear, but the water was a relief. For a fleeting moment she allowed herself to feel human. Thirst quenched, muscles eased slightly, but the silence was deceptive. Somewhere the enemy was watching, always watching. Memories of her training surfaced: night exercises in freezing mud, survival drills in dense forests, long marches with minimal rations. Each drill had been grueling, but now they were a lifeline. Emily adjusted her plan as she moved, thinking several steps ahead, using the terrain to her advantage. Every rock, every tree, every shadow became part of her strategy. By midday, Emily found herself on a steep incline overlooking an enemy supply route. She observed trucks moving slowly through the valley, soldiers walking between them. Intelligence she could gather here would be invaluable, but the risk was monumental. One wrong move and she would be spotted. She crouched low, analyzing patterns, memorizing guard rotations, and calculating the shortest path to avoid detection. She pressed on, taking a route that forced her through dense forest. Branches tore at her uniform, and every rustle of wildlife made her freeze. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, her energy was low, and the shadow seemed to stretch endlessly. But Emily reminded herself of her mission. Surviving alone was not enough. She had to complete her objective. Nightfall brought a temporary reprieve. Emily found a secluded hollow beneath a cluster of trees where she could rest, patch minor wounds, and tend to her gear. She rationed her remaining food with care, chewing slowly and savoring every bite. Her hands shook as she drank the last of her water, a sobering reminder of the precariousness of her situation. Alone in the darkness, her thoughts wandered to her lost teammates. Corporal Diaz, Lieutenant Sanders, Sergeant Kim, names that haunted her. Were they alive, captured, dead? She had no answers, only the memory of the explosion that had separated them. Emily allowed herself a single tear, but only one. Emotion was a luxury she could rarely afford. She whispered a vow under her breath. I will survive. I will honor you. Suddenly, movement in the underbrush snapped her back to reality. Emily froze, every muscle coiled like a spring. 2 enemy scouts were passing nearby, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. She pressed herself flat against the ground, holding her breath. The patrol lingered, almost sensing something, but eventually moved on. Emily exhaled slowly, realizing how close she had come to capture. The following hours were a test of endurance. Emily had to navigate treacherous cliffs, dense undergrowth, and hidden enemy checkpoints. At one point, she encountered a small ravine too wide to jump. Improvising, she used a fallen tree as a bridge, inching across with meticulous care. One slip could mean plunging into the rocky abyss below. Her fingers scraped against bark and stone, blood mixing with sweat, but she reached the other side safely. By morning, Emily stumbled upon a small village on the edge of a forest, seemingly abandoned. She moved cautiously through the empty streets, noting supplies that could aid her mission: canned food, bottled water, and a few discarded weapons. Her pulse raced as she searched. Every shadow could conceal an enemy soldier, but she had no choice but to take the risk. Survival meant using whatever the world offered her. Inside a partially destroyed home, Emily found a mirror and took a long, hard look at herself. Dirt smeared her uniform, blood caked on her arms, eyes wide with exhaustion yet blazing with determination. The face staring back was tired but resolute. She whispered to herself, "One step at a time, keep moving." She set up small traps around the perimeter of the building, a few scattered rocks to alert her of intruders, branches arranged to snap under weight, tiny noisemakers fashioned from scrap metal. Every precaution mattered. Every small edge could mean the difference between life and death. As night fell again, Emily moved silently towards higher ground to observe enemy movements. From her vantage point, she saw a convoy preparing to leave the village. Her pulse quickened. This was an opportunity. Gathering intel on their route could save lives if she managed to relay it back. But she also recognized the danger. Approaching too closely could expose her. She waited, hiding in the shadows, watching every movement with patience honed by fear and experience. Hours passed slowly, and Emily's mind wandered back to simpler times: the laughter of her siblings, the warmth of her family home, the safety of familiar surroundings. That life felt impossibly distant now. She shook her head, forcing herself to stay in the present. She couldn't afford distraction. Her survival depended on focus, calculation, and nerves of steel. As dawn approached, Emily made her decision. She would gather the intelligence without engaging the enemy directly. Using the terrain, her knowledge of enemy patterns, and her instincts, she planned a route that minimized exposure. Her body ached, hunger gnawed at her, and fatigue threatened to drag her down, but she pressed on. The mission demanded it. Every step forward was a reminder. Behind enemy lines, alone, hunted and exhausted, Emily Carter was more than a soldier. She was a force of nature, a survivor refusing to give in. And this was only the beginning. Cliffhanger. As Emily neared the convoy, she froze. Enemy guards were moving in unexpected directions. Her carefully laid plan might have been compromised. She had to make a split-second decision: move forward and risk exposure, or retreat and lose the chance for critical intelligence. The night held its breath, and Emily's fate hung by a thread. The roar of helicopter blades shook the ground as Emily clutched her gear, the desert wind whipping sand into her eyes. The landscape stretched endlessly, barren and unforgiving. This was no training ground. This was reality. Her first deployment, her first combat mission. Every heartbeat echoed in her chest as adrenaline surged. Fear, once a distant companion, now sat heavy in her stomach. Emily's unit had been assigned a reconnaissance mission in hostile territory. Their objective was simple on paper: secure the area, gather intelligence, and return safely. But Emily knew better. The unpredictability of war made even the simplest tasks perilous. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every sound could signal danger. The moment they touched down, Emily felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. She had trained for months, endured grueling drills, and proven herself capable in simulated battles, but nothing could fully prepare her for the chaos of real combat. The first encounter came sooner than expected. A distant explosion rocked the horizon, sending a wave of sand and debris into the air. The unit froze, weapons at the ready, scanning for threats. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she tightened her grip on her rifle. The fear she had learned to manage in training now surged with raw intensity. Her mind raced. Stay focused. Remember your training. Don't panic. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from an unseen position. Bullets whipped past, striking the earth and sending dirt into the air. Shouts filled the air, commands, warnings, and cries of alarm. Emily ducked behind a rock, her pulse pounding. This was real. Lives depended on her choices. Mistakes could cost her, her team, or both. As the firefight intensified, Emily's instincts kicked in. She recalled every obstacle course, every drill, every lesson Sergeant Davis had drilled into her. Assess, act, adapt. Moving with calculated precision, she crawled to a safer position, covering her teammates while returning fire. Her actions were deliberate, methodical, fueled by the training she had endured. In the chaos, Emily noticed Primate Miller, a new recruit, pinned down by enemy fire. His face was pale, eyes wide with fear. Without hesitation, Emily sprinted across exposed terrain, bullets whipping past her. She reached him, grabbing his arm and pulling him to cover behind a crumbling wall. "You okay?" she shouted over the din. Miller nodded, trembling. I think so." Emily's own heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. Leadership, she realized, wasn't just about issuing orders. It was about protecting, inspiring, and guiding others when fear threatened to overwhelm them. The skirmish lasted for what felt like hours, though in reality it was only minutes. By the time the firing subsided, Emily's uniform was caked with dirt and blood, her own and others. The reality of loss hit hard. 2 members of her unit were wounded, and the emotional toll was immediate. Emily had seen death up. The roar of helicopter blades shook the ground as Emily clutched her gear, the desert wind whipping sand into her eyes. The landscape stretched endlessly, barren and unforgiving. This was no training ground. This was reality. Her first deployment, her first combat mission. Every heartbeat echoed in her chest as adrenaline surged. Fear, once a distant companion, now sat heavy in her stomach. Emily's unit had been assigned a reconnaissance mission in hostile territory. Their objective was simple on paper: secure the area, gather intelligence, and return safely. But Emily knew better. The unpredictability of war made even the simplest tasks perilous. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every sound could signal danger. The moment they touched down, Emily felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. She had trained for months, endured grueling drills, and proven herself capable in simulated battles, but nothing could fully prepare her for the chaos of real combat. The first encounter came sooner than expected. A distant explosion rocked the horizon, sending a wave of sand and debris into the air. The unit froze, weapons at the ready, scanning for threats. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she tightened her grip on her rifle. The fear she had learned to manage in training now surged with raw intensity. Her mind raced. Stay focused. Remember your training. Don't panic. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from an unseen position. Bullets whipped past, striking the earth and sending dirt into the air. Shouts filled the air, commands, warnings, and cries of alarm. Emily ducked behind a rock, her pulse pounding. This was real. Lives depended on her choices. Mistakes could cost her, her team, or both. As the firefight intensified, Emily's instincts kicked in. She recalled every obstacle course, every drill, every lesson Sergeant Davis had drilled into her. Assess, act, adapt. Moving with calculated precision, she crawled to a safer position, covering her teammates while returning fire. Her actions were deliberate, methodical, fueled by the training she had endured. In the chaos, Emily noticed Primate Miller, a new recruit, pinned down by enemy fire. His face was pale, eyes wide with fear. Without hesitation, Emily sprinted across exposed terrain, bullets whipping past her. She reached him, grabbing his arm and pulling him to cover behind a crumbling wall. "You okay?" she shouted over the din. Miller nodded, trembling. I think so." Emily's own heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. Leadership, she realized, wasn't just about issuing orders. It was about protecting, inspiring, and guiding others when fear threatened to overwhelm them. The skirmish lasted for what felt like hours, though in reality it was only minutes. By the time the firing subsided, Emily's uniform was caked with dirt and blood, her own and others. The reality of loss hit hard. 2 members of her unit were wounded, and the emotional toll was immediate. Emily had seen death up close, felt the sting of danger, and confronted the fragility of life in a way she never had before. After the firefight, the team regrouped. Sergeant Davis approached Emily, her expression unreadable. "You handled yourself well," she said finally. "Not everyone makes the right call when lives are on the line. You did. But remember, courage isn't just about the fight, it's about living with the consequences of it. Never underestimate that." Emily nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. She had acted bravely, but the cost of war was starkly real. Her triumph was tempered by the reality of human vulnerability. Fear had returned, but this time it wasn't paralyzing. It was a guide, a reminder that caution and courage must coexist. The days that followed were a relentless blur of missions, patrols, and strategic maneuvers. Emily faced ambushes, improvised explosive devices, and the constant uncertainty of an enemy that could strike at any moment. Each scenario demanded split-second decisions, each choice carrying profound consequences. During one particularly harrowing mission, Emily's unit was tasked with rescuing hostages from an enemy stronghold. The operation required stealth, precision, and coordination. The tension was suffocating. Emily moved silently through the shadows, every nerve alert. When an enemy soldier appeared unexpectedly, she froze for a heartbeat, then acted decisively, neutralizing the threat without alerting others. Moments like these defined Emily's transformation. She was no longer the timid girl from a small town. She was a soldier, capable of decisive action under extreme pressure. Her confidence had grown, tempered by the humbling awareness that mistakes could be fatal. Courage, she understood now, was not about the absence of fear, it was mastery of it and the responsibility that came with it. Yet the emotional toll remained. Emily found herself lying awake at night, staring at the stars through a small opening in the tent. She thought about the friends she had lost, the fear she had felt, and the choices she had made. Tears came unbidden, a mixture of grief, relief, and resolve. War had changed her, not just physically, but at the core of her being. It was during these quiet moments that Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the small wooden steps of her hometown to the grueling obstacle courses of boot camp, every step had been preparation for this reality. She had faced fear in countless forms: self-doubt, physical exhaustion, mental strain, and now she faced it in its most raw and unforgiving form. Emily's defining moment came during a final confrontation with enemy forces. Surrounded and outnumbered, the unit faced a critical decision: retreat and risk casualties, or advance and attempt to neutralize the threat. Emily's training, instincts, and courage converged. She led a tactical maneuver, coordinating with her team, using cover and diversion to outsmart the enemy. The mission succeeded with minimal loss, a victory earned through bravery, skill, and unwavering resolve. By the end of the deployment, Emily had not only survived, but she had proven herself in the crucible of combat. Her unit recognized her courage, her leadership, and her unbreakable spirit. Emily had become what she had aspired to be, a fearless warrior forged in the heat of real-life battles, tempered by fear, but not controlled by it. As the transport helicopter lifted off, carrying the exhausted but victorious unit back to base, Emily gazed down at the landscape she had fought to navigate and protect. The world below was harsh, dangerous, and unpredictable, but she had faced it. Fear had been her companion, but it had not dictated her actions. Courage had prevailed, forged through experience, choice, and unwavering determination. Emily knew the journey wasn't over. More challenges awaited, more missions. Emily stepped off the transport plane, her boots crunching against the tarmac as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the base. The roar of engines faded behind her, leaving a rare moment of quiet. Home was no longer just the familiar streets of her small town. It was now a feeling of accomplishment, resilience, and transformation. She had survived combat, led under pressure, and discovered strength she never knew she possessed. But the journey hadn't just changed her, it had redefined who she was. As she walked through the familiar corridors of the base, fellow soldiers greeted her with nods, smiles, and words of respect. Many had witnessed her courage firsthand. Some had even fought alongside her during life-or-death situations. Emily had earned not just survival, but admiration. She felt a swell of pride, but beneath it, a quiet humility reminded her of the cost, the friends lost, the fear confronted, and the sacrifices made along the way. Returning home, however, brought a different kind of challenge. The street she once knew seemed smaller, quieter, almost trivial compared to the chaos she had endured overseas. Family and friends were eager to welcome her back, but Emily felt a disconnect. How could she explain the nights filled with fear, the adrenaline pumping through her veins, the moments where courage was the only option? Words felt insufficient. Her younger brother, Jake, ran to greet her at the doorstep, a mixture of excitement and awe in his eyes. "Em, you're back, and you did it." Emily knelt down to hug him, feeling a strange combination of relief and wistfulness. "I did, Jake, but it wasn't just me. It was the team, the training, everything I learned along the way." Her parents embraced her tightly, tears in their eyes. "We were so worried," her mother whispered, voice trembling. "But seeing you now, we're so proud." Pride, however, was only part of Emily's emotion. She had changed, irrevocably. The fear that had once dominated her life had transformed into wisdom, courage, and a deep understanding of responsibility. Every choice she had made, every step through the training grounds and war zone had brought her here, to a place where fear no longer dictated her actions, but informed them. Emily found herself seeking ways to share what she had learned. She began volunteering with local youth programs, speaking at schools and community centers about courage, resilience, and facing fears. The same townspeople who had once doubted her capacity for bravery now listened intently to her words. Her story inspired young men and women, showing them that fear is not weakness, it is the first step toward transformation. One day, while mentoring a group of teenagers, Emily noticed a girl who reminded her of herself before enlistment, hesitant, uncertain, and overwhelmed by self-doubt. The girl's hands shook as she tried to complete a simple obstacle, frustration building with every failed attempt. Emily knelt beside her. "It's okay," she said softly. "I know how it feels to be scared. I know what it's like to think you're not strong enough. But strength isn't about never failing. It's about trying again and again, even when it's hard." The girl looked up at her, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. Emily smiled. You have it in you. You just have to believe it and take that first step. That moment crystallized Emily's journey. She realized that courage was not just for the battlefield, it was a way of life. Her experiences had given her a unique perspective. Fear was a constant companion, but action, perseverance, and choice transformed it into strength. Even in quiet moments at home, Emily reflected on the lessons learned. She would often sit by her window at dusk, gazing at the horizon where the sun dipped below the hills. The memories of combat, the chaos, the fear, the moments of clarity were etched in her mind. Yet they no longer held her captive. Instead, they reminded her of what she was capable of: resilience, bravery, and leadership. Emily also reconnected with her mentor, Sergeant Davis, through letters and calls. Their conversations were filled with gratitude and reflection. You've grown far beyond what I expected, not just as a soldier, but as a person. Your courage inspires others now, just as it inspired me during your first days of training. Emily smiled, feeling the weight and beauty of those words. She understood that her journey wasn't just about her own transformation. It was about empowering others to confront their fears, to step into uncertainty, and to realize their potential. Months passed, and Emily continued to grow. She began a formal mentorship program at her base, helping new recruits navigate the challenges of training and deployment. She shared strategies for managing fear, maintaining focus under pressure, and building resilience. Her story became a beacon, a testament to the power of choice, courage, and perseverance. The most profound realization came during a quiet evening as Emily walked alone through her hometown. She passed the small park where she had first dreamed of serving, the bench where Mr. Harris had shared his wisdom, and the steps of her home where her journey began. Everything looked the same, yet Emily felt completely different. She had traveled a path few could imagine, faced trials that tested her to the core, and emerged as someone stronger, wiser, and unshakably determined. Emily's journey from fear to fearless warrior was not just a personal victory, it was a story meant to be shared, a message of hope, and a guide for anyone struggling with doubt or fear. She understood now that fear would never truly disappear, but it no longer had power over her. Courage, choice, and action had replaced it, and that was a triumph greater than any medal or recognition. And so, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Emily allowed herself a deep, satisfied breath. She had faced fear, endured hardship, and emerged victorious, not because she was fearless, but because she had chosen to act despite the fear. She smiled, thinking of the young recruits she would continue to inspire, the communities she could empower, and the life she had built on courage. Emily had learned that bravery is not a destination, it's a journey, one that begins the moment you take the first step. As night fell and stars dotted the sky, Emily whispered quietly to herself, a mantra forged through experience and determination. Fear will always be there, but I am stronger, I am brave, I am ready. And with that, Emily walked forward, not just as a soldier, but as a living testament to the power of courage, resilience, and the human spirit.